Welcome to the deep dive. Today, let's forget the open houses and maybe the mortgage calculators just for a bit.
Yeah.
Because we're going deeper. We're looking at the real story behind buying a home.
Okay.
We've gathered quite a bit of info here, psychology, local rules, the whole 9 yards. The idea is to get past the shiny ads.
Right. Beyond the brochure and understand what's really going on. Because, home ownership, it's seen as this huge milestone, isn't it?
Totally. The big achievement.
But the stuff we've looked at, it paints a much more complicated picture, sometimes challenging, lots of unexpected feelings involved.
Feelings? How so?
Well, there was this Bank of America study, I think last year. It found over 70% of first-time buyers were actually really surprised by the emotional side of it all.
Wow, over 70%.
Yeah.
That's huge. Okay, so let's dig into that emotional angle. Our sources mention cognitive dissonance. What's that about in home buying?
Right. Well, think of it like this internal tug of war. People might, know buying is a financial stretch, a big one.
They see the numbers.
Exactly. They see the debt they're taking on, but they still go for it. Why? Because there's this massive societal pressure, this idea that owning a home is just, it's what you're supposed to do.
That script society hands you.
Precisely. So your brain kind of fights what your bank balance might be screaming at you.
Yeah, I can see that. It's like you feel you should want the big suburban house, the yard.
Oh.
Even if, deep down, you thrive on city buzz.
And then you end up with a long commute you hate.
Right. And our material actually uses that example. Someone buying the suburban dream home and then, boom, regretting leaving the walkable city life behind.
And that just nails it, doesn't it? Buying a home isn't just about shelter. It's really about lining up those dreams, those ideals with, your actual day-to-day life.
Yeah, how well do they match up? Okay. Now, what about different generations? Things look pretty different for millennials and Gen Z trying to buy, right?
Oh, absolutely. The sources point to some serious headwinds for younger folks. You've got much higher student debt loads, for one.
Yeah, that's a big one.
And people are hitting traditional milestones, marriage, stable careers a bit later. And the killer, wages just haven't kept up with how fast housing costs have shot up.
So the math just doesn't work the same way it used to. What are they doing then? Is the old path even possible for many?
Well, we're seeing some really creative workarounds. Co-buying is one, friends, family pooling money together. That's more common now.
Interesting.
And things like tiny homes, that reflects a desire for ownership, but maybe on a more manageable scale. Plus, remote work changing the game.
How so?
People can now look at buying in cheaper areas, maybe places further out, because they aren't tied to a daily commute.
Right, so it's like the whole idea of making it or settling down is kind of morphing. Owning a house isn't the only definition of success anymore.
Exactly. It might just be one piece of a bigger, maybe more flexible life plan for some, not the ultimate end goal itself.
Which kind of leads us to another tough spot some owners find themselves in, being house poor. We hear that term a lot. What does that actually look like?
Well, the info we have defines it pretty clearly. It's basically when your mortgage plus taxes, insurance, maybe HOA fees, all that stuff.
The hidden costs.
Yeah. All those eats up such a huge chunk of your income that there's barely anything left for, life, emergencies, fun, savings, it's all squeezed.
So you work like crazy to get the house, and then the house itself kind of traps you financially. Ouch.
That's the sting, yeah. And there's a psychological piece, too, which is fascinating. People feel stuck.
Just cows.
Stuck in this dream they poured everything into, even if it's bleeding them dry financially. It's hard to admit it didn't work out, maybe downsize, pride, regret. It's all mixed up in there.
Wow. One source called it a beautiful prison. That really paints a picture.
Yeah.
Okay, so stepping back, why is housing so expensive anyway? That's the million-dollar question, literally sometimes.
Yeah, no kidding. Well, fundamentally, it's classic supply and demand, but with a twist. There just aren't enough homes for sale. A big reason.
Let me guess. Mortgage rates.
Bingo. So many homeowners locked in super low rates, like 3% or even less a few years back. Now rates are much higher. So they're understandably reluctant to sell and trade that amazing rate for a new, much higher one.
Yeah, why would you? So they stay put. Fewer houses on the market.
Exactly. And at the same time, you've got huge demand, especially from millennials hitting their prime home buying years. Our sources, like Yahoo Finance, point this out. Low supply, high demand, prices go up.
Simple economics, painful reality. But it's not just that, is it? What about rules and regulations?
Right. Local zoning plays a massive role. Things like exclusionary zoning rules about minimum lot sizes or only allowing single-family homes in large areas.
How does that affect cost?
Well, it limits the construction of denser, often more affordable housing like apartments or townhouses. Groups like Brookings are really pushing for zoning reform to allow more types of housing and bring costs down.
Okay, so zoning connects directly to these bigger issues of gentrification and equity. It's not just about money, it's about who gets to live where.
Absolutely. And what's interesting is seeing how zoning reform can be used positively. Charlottesville, Virginia is an example our sources mention.
What are they doing?
They've been changing zoning to allow more density, building up, not just out, while also trying to protect existing, potentially vulnerable neighborhoods. It's about finding a balance.
A balance is tricky, though, especially with gentrification. Revitalization sounds good, but often means pushing people out.
That's the harsh reality highlighted in our material. Often, long-term residents, usually with lower incomes, get displaced as rents and property values rise. They can't afford to stay.
So are there ways to counter that?
Well, one tool sources like PolicyLink point to is inclusionary zoning. Basically, it requires developers building new projects in certain areas to include a percentage of affordable units.
Ah, so building affordability into new development.
Exactly, trying to create more mixed income communities rather than just letting areas become exclusively high cost.
This definitely makes you think, though. Buying in a neighborhood labeled up and coming, it sounds smart, maybe profitable. But our sources push us to ask harder questions.
Like, who lived here before? Whose displacement is making this coming up possible? Am I part of the problem?
Yeah. Is my choice making inequality worse? There's this example of material, right? A couple buys in a revitalizing area.
And then they start to see it. Their presence, along with others like them, pushes up costs, and the original residents, the legacy residents, start getting pushed out.
Oof. It suggests ethical buying means thinking about that broader community impact.
Definitely. It's more than just finding a house you like. It's about considering the ripples.
Okay, let's pivot slightly. A core question for many. Rent or buy? What are the basic pros and cons we should keep in mind based on our sources?
Okay, renting. Big pro. Flexibility. Easier to move for jobs, life changes, whatever. Upfront costs are way lower too. No down payment, usually lower initial fees.
And no maintenance headaches.
Huge plus. Landlord fixes the leaky roof. On the flip side, though, you're not building equity. Your rent can go up, and you have less control over making the place feel truly yours.
Right, okay, owning.
Well, the big one is building equity over time. It's an asset. You generally have more stability, no landlord kicking you out, potential tax breaks sometimes.
Well,
But huge upfront costs, down payment, closing costs.
Yep.
It's a barrier. You own the maintenance headaches. Now leaky roof is your problem and your expense. And much less flexibility if you need to move quickly.
so as Meridian Financial Partners points out in our info, there's no single right answer. It really depends.
Totally depends. Your finances, your lifestyle, what you value more, flexibility or stability, your long-term goals. It's super personal.
Absolutely. Now, whichever path you lean towards, especially buying, real estate agents often come into play. What's their value, really? And how do you pick a good one?
They can be incredibly valuable, especially for first-timers or people relocating. Our sources, like hillsbank.com, highlight their local market knowledge, knowing neighborhoods, pricing trends. That's huge.
And navigating the process.
Yeah, helping with negotiations, managing all the paperwork. It can be overwhelming otherwise. They should know the pitfalls.
So finding the right one seems key.
Crucial. The material suggests getting referrals from people you trust. But don't just take the first one. Interview a few agents.
Interview them, like a job interview.
Kinda. See if they click with you, if they really understand what you need.
Yeah.
Check their experience in the specific area you're interested in. You want someone who's going to be your advocate. Really look out for your interests.
Got it. Okay, so you find an agent, find a house. Then comes the potentially scary part. Mortgages, bidding wars, inspections.
Deep breaths. Yeah, first step. Get pre-approved for that mortgage. Seriously. It shows sellers you're serious and tells you exactly what you can realistically afford.
Essential first step. Then bidding wars.
Yeah, in hot markets, they're common. Strategies. While sometimes offering over the asking price is necessary, being flexible on the closing date can help.
What about waiving things, like inspections? Some sources mention that.
Tread very carefully there. Waiving contingencies, especially the home inspection, can make your offer stronger, sure.
Right.
But it's risky. Hugely risky.
Why risky? Seems obvious, but spell it out.
Because that inspection is your chance to find potentially massive expensive problems before you own the house. Foundation issues, bad roof, faulty electrical. Skipping it means you could buy a money pit without knowing.
Yikes. So, generally not advised unless you really know what you're doing or have funds set aside for major repairs.
Exactly. Our sources really stress the importance of inspections. It's usually money very well spent for peace of mind or for identifying negotiation points.
And it's not just the basic inspection, is it? There are other potential risks.
Right. Our material points out things buyers sometimes skip but maybe shouldn't. Radon tests, for instance. Sewer line scopes, you do not want an unexpected sewer line replacement bill.
Oh God, no.
Mold or asbestos testing in older homes. These aren't always standard, but can uncover big problems.
And now there's a whole new layer. Climate risk.
Increasingly important, yes. Floodplain assessments, general climate vulnerability. Think about increased risks of wildfires, hurricanes, flooding, depending on the area.
How does that impact buying?
Well, it can mean much higher insurance premiums.
Yeah.
Or in some high-risk zones, you might struggle to get insurance coverage at all. That's a huge deal for mortgage lenders and for your own financial safety.
So these extra inspections, these climate checks, they're like an investment in resilience.
That's a great way to put it. It's about understanding the long-term risks and costs associated with a specific property in a changing world.
Okay, so putting it all together, from starting the search to actually moving in, what's a typical timeline look like? It feels like it takes forever.
It can feel that way. Our sources give some averages. The actual house hunting part, finding the place, viewing properties, maybe seeing around 10 homes on average, that takes about 10 weeks typically.
10 weeks of searching.
Yeah.
Okay, then you get an offer accepted.
Then the closing process kicks in. That's mortgage finalization, appraisal, title search, those inspections we talked about, mountains of paperwork. Divvy Homes suggests that usually takes another 30 to 60 days.
So best case, maybe 3 or 4 months total. Worst case.
Could easily stretch to 6 months or more. Depends heavily on the market, how quickly financing comes through, if any issues pop up during inspection, negotiation back and forth. Lots of variables.
And I imagine that timeline gets even more stretched and complicated if you're relocating, buying somewhere totally new.
Oh, massively. Buying a home while moving to a new city or especially a new country, that adds whole other layers of complexity.
What are the key things to consider there?
Research becomes even more critical. Our material hammers this home. You need to understand the cost of living difference, the specific local housing market quirks, what the neighborhoods are really like, schools, amenities.
Stuff you might take for granted where you live now.
Exactly. And that local real estate expert we talked about. Even more crucial when you're buying from afar. They're your eyes and ears on the ground.
Plus just the sheer logistics.
Oh, yeah. Figuring out travel for house hunting trips, coordinating timelines across maybe different time zones, the actual massive job of packing and moving all your stuff long distance, it's a lot.
But it's not just the practical stuff, is it? The sources talk about the emotional side of relocating, too.
Yeah, and it's often underestimated. Moving, especially a long-distance one tied to buying a home, is a major life upheaval. There's often a real sense of loss involved.
Loss of what?
Your community, your support network, daily routines, just the comfort of the familiar, maybe even a shift in your identity, new job, new regional culture, and sometimes guilt or sadness about leaving family or friends behind.
That's powerful. The material even mentions grief, right?
Yeah.
Even for a positive move.
Absolutely. You might be thrilled about the new house and city, but still feel real grief living behind, say, a rented apartment where you made years of memories. It's complex.
So buying during relocation isn't just about the destination, it's also about processing what you're leaving.
Very much so. It really connects back to those deeper psychological, almost philosophical points about homeownership.
Wow, so
Well, our sources explore how owning a home often gets tied up with our identity, right? It's seen as a sign of achievement, stability, which is fine, but it's not the only way to feel stable or successful.
right. That tension again between flexibility, maybe more associated with renting, and stability, often linked to owning.
And the key is figuring out which aligns better with your values, your current life stage, your future plans. There's no universal right answer.
And thinking even bigger picture, our choices about where and how we live, they ripple outwards, don't they?
They really do. Our buying decisions shape urban development patterns. They impact socioeconomic mixes in neighborhoods. They influence cultural dynamics. Being mindful of that, as our sources suggest, can maybe help foster communities that are a bit more equitable.
This has been incredibly illuminating. It makes you think about all the things people don't ask themselves when they get swept up in the home buying frenzy.
Oh, totally. Our sources actually list some really critical self-reflection questions.
Like what?
Like, do I genuinely want to own? Or do I just feel like I should? How will this tie me down? Will it limit my future options or flexibility in ways I haven't considered?
Good ones. What else?
Am I buying this specific house? Or am I really buying some idealized lifestyle I think this house will magically deliver? Am I truly, honestly prepared for the unglamorous reality of maintenance costs and surprise repairs?
That maintenance one is huge.
And this one really hits home for me. Am I feeling more genuine excitement about this, or is it more about FOMO, fear of missing out? Am I just trying to keep up?
Oof, that cuts deep. It shifts the focus inward, doesn't it?
Completely. It contrasts with the usual main question, which our material points out is often just, can I afford the monthly payment?
Right? The practical question.
But the deeper, maybe more crucial question is, will this home actually fit the life I genuinely want to live? Not just now, but looking ahead.
That's a much bigger, more fundamental question. Which brings us to a final thought from our sources, kind of a philosophical wrap-up.
Yeah, despite all the spreadsheets and legal docs, buying a home is, well, it's deeply personal. Almost existential, you could say.
Existential. How so?
Because it's more than just a transaction. One source calls it a leap of identity, a contract with a future self. You're making a huge commitment based on who you are now and who you hope to be.
Wow. A leap of identity. I like that.
And ultimately, whether you end up owning or renting or living some other way, the place you inhabit doesn't just, hold your stuff. It actively shapes your life.
It influences your routines, your interactions, your perspective.
In countless ways, big and small.
So wrapping up this deep dive, the big takeaway seems to be, home buying is way more complicated than it looks. The financial part is just one piece of a much larger puzzle.
Definitely. We hope listeners will really mull over some of these questions, think about their own reasons, their own priorities.
Consider this conversation maybe a starting point for your own digging, your own research,
Yeah.
and maybe leave you with this thought to chew on.
The place you live doesn't just contain your life, it actively shapes it. Always.